and turn around and be like, this guy, he's Hasan. Instead of Hamas, I'm saying Hasan.
Wait a minute.
The manifesto is indeed that of the Israeli embassy shooter. He previously used his email address, elias94@gmail.com, for the account Kyoto Loather, but was, oh shit, it got suspended in the meantime, he claims, banned after DMing death threats to Will Stansel. Okay, well, we can't actually read it from that any longer because his account got nuked. But here is the alleged manifesto written by Elias Rodriguez. Kenny Clips has it. Suspecting the killing of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C. I believe the document to be authentic for several reasons, including the fact that it is signed by Rodriguez and timestamped well before he was named by law enforcement or any media. I am publishing it here, not to glorify the violence, which I find abhorrent and condemn, but so the public can better understand the truth of what happened. Refusing to confront the content of these texts often creates an information vacuum that is quickly filled by hoax documents, conspiracy theories, or selective leaks from authorities that can distort the facts. I believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant, especially when politics is involved, as the document makes it clear the case here. Metropolitan Police Chief Pamela A. Smith identified Rodriguez as a 30-year-old man from Chicago who she says shouted "Free, Free Palestine" at the scene. The manifesto echoes this message, citing the war in Gaza as a central grievance and framing the killings as an act of political protest. Below is the document in full. Apparently lived 2 blocks from me. FBI was at his place this morning. Yeah, and I have another one of your neighbors in here on the docket as well. DC shooter's neighbor speaks, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Before reading the manifesto, I think it's important to remind people that adventurism and propaganda of the deed is overwhelmingly ineffective as tactics. Anarchists were wrong about adventurism, such as ad hoc actions mainly just gives the state an excuse to do repression. Yes. I, of course, will not stand for any kind of state repression in this circumstance. Why are you doing cooked? He was not following me. What the fuck do you mean? He was, however, following a bunch of... he was following Joe Weisenthal, you know what I mean? That's why it's so crazy that these motherfuckers are like lying and saying that this guy was a fan of mine or something. He was a Sneeko fan? No, he wasn't. I don't think he was a Sneeko fan at all. I'd be surprised. You get Thanos snapped if you ever spoke your name on the internet. You know what's fucking crazy about that, by the way? There are literal white supremacist shooters who have identified why they are doing this act of like insane white supremacist violence, whether it be like shooting a mall in El Paso or shooting a fucking synagogue or shooting a black church or whatever. And they will openly be like, I'm doing this because Tim Pool. I'm doing this because I love Tim Pool and I think Tim Pool is right. I'm doing this because Ben Shapiro convinced me to do this. And none of that is ever litigated. None of that. Okay. That's First Amendment protected. That connection is not stochastic terrorism. That doesn't work. Meanwhile, all of those people will then turn around without even a shred of decency, a hint of irony whatsoever, and turn around and be like, this guy, he's Hasan. Instead of Hamas, I'm saying Hasan. Yeah, with no evidence whatsoever. I suspect this is the type of person who thinks I'm too much of a pussy for fucking even saying that there were acts that were atrocities that were akin to acts of terror on October 7. It's like the type of person who thinks like I'm too much of a pussy, for the record. Anyway, let's start. Halantar is a word that means something like thunder or lightning. In the wake of an act, people look for a text to fix its meaning. So here's an attempt. The atrocities committed by Israelis against Palestine defy description and defy quantification. Instead of reading descriptions mostly, we watch them unfold on video, sometimes live. After a few months of rapidly mounting death tolls, Israel had obliterated the capacity to even continue counting the dead, which has served its genocide well. At the time of the writing, the Gaza Health Ministry records 53,000 killed by traumatic force, at least 10,000 lie under rubble, and who knows how many thousands more dead of preventable disease, hunger, with tens of thousands now at the risk of imminent famine due to the Israeli blockade. All enabled by Western and Arab government complicity. The Gaza Information Office includes the 10,000 under the rubble with the dead in their own count. In news reports, there have been those 10,000 under the rubble for months now, despite the continual making of more rubble and repeated bombing of rubble again and again, and the bombings of tents amid the rubble, like the Yemen death toll, which had been frozen at some few thousand for few years under the Saudi, US, UK bombardment before being belatedly revealed to stand at 500,000 dead. All of these figures are almost surely a criminal undercount. I have no trouble believing the estimates that put the toll at 100,000 or more. More have been murdered since March of this year than in the Protective Edge and Kasled put together. These are two previous sieges that Israel implemented on Gaza in the past. What more at this point can one say about the proportion of mangled and burned and exploded human beings whom were children? We who let this happen will never deserve the Palestinians' forgiveness. They've let us know as much. An armed action is not necessarily a military action. It usually is not. Usually it is theater and a spectacle, a quality it shares with many unarmed actions. Nonviolent protests in the opening weeks of the genocide seem to signal some sort of turning point. Never before had so many tens of thousands joined the sides of Palestinians in the streets across the West. Never before had so many American politicians been forced to concede that, rhetorically at least, the Palestinians were human beings too. But thus far, the rhetoric has not amounted to much. The Israelis themselves boast about their own shock at the free hand the Americans have given them to exterminate the Palestinians. Public opinion has shifted against the genocidal apartheid state, and the American government has simply shrugged. They'll do without public opinion then, criminalize it where they can, suffocate it with bland reassurances that they're doing all they can to restrain Israel where it cannot criminalize protests outright. Aaron Bushnell and others sacrificed themselves in the hopes of stopping the massacre, and the state works to make us feel their sacrifice was made in vain, that there is no hope in escalating for Gaza, and no point in bringing the war home. We can't let them succeed. Their sacrifices were not made in vain. The impunity that representatives of our government feel at abetting the slaughter should be revealed as an illusion then. The impunity we see is the worst for those of us in immediate proximity to the genocidaires. A surgeon who treated victims of the Mayan genocide by the Guatemalan state recounts an instant in which he was operating on a patient who'd been critically injured during a massacre when, suddenly, armed gunmen entered the room and shot the patient to death on his operating table, laughing as they killed him. The physician said the worst part was seeing the killers, well known to him, openly swagger down local streets in the years after. Elsewhere, a man of conscience once attempted to throw Robert McNamara off a Martha's Vineyard-bound ferry into the sea, incensed at the same impunity and arrogance he saw in that butcher of Vietnam as he sat in the ferry's lounge laughing with his friends. The man took issue with McNamara's very posture, telling you, my history is fine, and I can be slumped over a bar like this with my good friend Ralph here, and you'll have to lump it. The man did not succeed in heaving McNamara off a catwalk into the water. The former Secretary of State managed to cling to the railing and clamber back to his feet, but the assailant explicated the value of the attempt by saying, well, I got him outside, just the two of us, and suddenly his history wasn't so fine, was it? A word about the morality of armed demonstration. Those of us against the genocide take satisfaction in arguing that the perpetrators and abettors have forfeited their humanity. I sympathize with this viewpoint and understand its value in soothing the psyche, which cannot bear to accept the atrocities it witnesses, even mediated through the screen. But inhumanity has long since shown itself to be shockingly common, mundane, prosaically human. A perpetrator may then be a loving parent, a filial child, a generous and charitable friend, an amiable stranger, capable of moral strength at times when it suits him, and sometimes even when it does not, and yet be a monster all the same. Humanity does not exempt one from accountability. The action would have been morally justified taken 11 years ago during Protective Edge, around the time I personally became acutely aware of our brutal conduct in Palestine. But I think to most Americans, such an action would have been illegible, would seem insane. I am glad that today, at least, there are many Americans for which the action will be highly legible and in some funny way, the only sane thing to do. I love you, Mom, Dad, baby sis, the rest of my familia, including you. And then it says, censored. Free Palestine, Elias Rodriguez. Now, the reason why I read this manifesto, and we have obviously read the manifestos of white nationalist shooters as well, is oftentimes to understand that is oftentimes to understand the mindset of this person, especially when there are a lot of mainstream narratives that will immediately design an alternative scenario. I don't think that this person acted out on an anti-Semitic desire or is a fucking Nazi or anything like that. But that is dangerous in a separate way, okay? The very fact that a person who is this legible, Okay? The very fact that a person who has their shit together enough to be able to write a fucking write prose such as this one in the act of vengeance, in the act of vigilante justice in his own mind is meaningful in and of itself. It's meaningful because it means that there are people who haven't fucking lost their minds that also see and are choosing to take action such as this, taking action such as this that is terrifying for the average person, okay? Regardless of what their position is. One thing I will say about this manifesto is that it is shockingly well written and thought out for being a shooter manifesto. Exactly, because this is the reason why I'm reading this. The reason why I read this is specifically so that you understand that like there is a shit ton of people that are like, no, this is done. This is conducted. The shooter's actions were directly about finding some Jewish victim to kill. Okay, it's deliberate. It's very clear. It's clear what his reasoning is. You don't have to agree with what he did. And I'm not urging you to, okay? I'm not saying that at all. But it is deliberate. Now, ask yourself why the media is not saying that the shooter did this because they were distraught with the violence that they had seen unfolded in Gaza. By his own admission. They don't have an issue saying the shooter is a fucking white supremacist when the shooter is a white supremacist. When a shooter writes a manifesto and they're a fucking white supremacist, okay, the media will at least take parts of that manifesto to dive deep into the consciousness of the fucking stochastic terrorist. They don't have an issue then. They will openly be like, this is a white supremacist shooter. He went to a fucking area where there were black and brown people and they wanted to kill as many black and brown people as possible to fucking spark like a race riot or whatever fucking dumb shit that these crackheads believe. Okay, the reason why the media won't actually fucking cover the purpose here is because they are worried about copycats. Number one, even though they're obviously worried about copycats in every single circumstance, that's an understandable fear to have. But more importantly than copycats, the reason why the motivation here is left to whatever the Israeli government is saying, even though they're fucking thousands of miles away. The reason why the narrative is set in this way is because this, if shown to the average American is not exactly favorable on Israel. The average American is not exactly going to, they're already selfish. They're already violent. We are predisposed to violence in this country. We have an incredible amount of tolerance for violent acts. That's the reason why they don't want to fucking, mention this shit. That's the reason why they won't talk about this. Having said that, regardless of his manifesto, there are obvious differences between him and Luigi Mangione. One of the largest differences between him and Luigi Mangione is the fact that his victims, or at least the event that he was targeting, at least was like somewhat relevant to Israel, but it does not matter because the people that he was targeting, just like Luigi Mangione was targeting United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, okay? Allegedly, Luigi Mangione was allegedly targeting United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson at a healthcare conference that Brian Thompson was attending. But Luigi Mangione allegedly, or whoever the shooter is for the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, whoever the shooter is, maybe not Luigi Mangione, allegedly, didn't just go to that conference and shoot whoever came out, okay? There is a major difference. There is a major difference in these two events. Do you see what I'm saying? Because the reality of the matter is, while Americans are very draconian, there is a reason why they were favorable to Luigi Mangione's position. They immediately understood, allegedly, before we even knew who Luigi Mangione was, once the name of the victim came out, once the name of the murder victim came out, Brian Thompson, everybody knew what the fuck was up. Shooter outed as a 4chaner, likely Habbo Hotel in Nazi 88. via Chad Loader on Blue Sky. I don't know about all that. Please check logs. I'm serious, says Barack Hussein Obama. Okay, yes, I know Harvard is no longer allowed to have international students. I know. Come on, no one knew who Brian Thompson was until after he died? No, my point is, it wasn't his name that was relevant. It was his position in society. Everybody knew what was up when they were like, this is Brian Thompson. Who is that? United Healthcare CEO. Oh, I know why that took place. That's what I mean. In any case, ultimately, knowing full well what the government will do with this information, knowing full well what institutions are doing with this information, organizations like the ADL are trying to get out of this information, two things should come to mind. One, be careful with what you say, even if you are exaggerating or even if you're joking, especially if you have even an anonymous account, because anything and everything you say will always be used against you. That's number one. And number two, do not fucking allow any oxygen for victimhood narratives as it pertains to Israel. Okay? That's it. The idea that this is a neo-Nazi that came after Jewish people deliberately looking for Jews to kill, like all of that stuff is incorrect. This is not a value judgment on the actions of the shooter. But it's obvious that this was a person that was brain broken by a lot of the realities that are unfolding in Gaza. And now it's being used by those who seek to defend Israel to try and turn around and further prosecute those who say free Palestine. So many of the Hasbro accounts on the timeline are either A, coming after me and numerous other pro-Palestinian content creators and speakers, but they're also just saying insane shit like the keffiyeh is actually the Nazi armband, or the mention of free Palestine should be fucking considered like it's the mention of free Palestine should be considered as though in the same wavelength as the same wavelength as like a neo-Nazi sentiment.